Many thanks, Stefano. Hello, good morning, everyone. Thanks for the kind introduction. It's very nice to be here again. We are great supporters of WICI and all the efforts that are being done to advance, if you want, reporting on intangibles. You all know that we're great supporters also of everything around sustainability, and that we've done a lot of things over the last few years to establish more comprehensive sustainability reporting by corporates and others. I will say a few words about that at the end of my intervention, but maybe I'll start with a general debate. I'm not going to get into the academic debate on intangibles. I think others are much better placed to do this, and I think my fellow panelists who will dial in online will probably also say a bit more about that. We all know what the debate is about. Some argue that accounting shortcomings on intangibles can be demonstrated through very high price-to-book values. Others say this is maybe more a case of market madness. We all know about the discrepancy with the accounting for takeovers and acquisitions under IFRS 3, and when previously non-recognized own intangibles are recognized upon acquisition, and these kinds of debates. So there's lots of theoretical discussion ongoing, but I think on a practical level, I'm going to focus on two issues. The one is how we've positioned ourselves relative to the efforts being done by the IASB and what EFRAG has done so far in terms of contributing to this debate. Hans has kindly left that to me. He's focused on the organizational side of EFRAG. And then, as I said, I'll talk a bit about what we're doing in the area of sustainability reporting. So you're all following, of course, also what the IASB is doing in terms of reviewing IAS 38. And in its response to the IASB's third agenda consultation, EFRAG has recommended to the IASB to undertake a comprehensive assessment of IAS 38, including the recognition and measurement requirements. Now, the aim should be to better reflect the ever-increasing importance of intangibles in today's business models, of course, to improve comparability between companies that grow organically with those that do so through acquisitions, to address emerging types of transactions and assets, including emissions trading rights and crypto assets. And in April 2023, following the comment period, EFRAG has issued its recommendations and feedback statement, which in summary identifies, I think, 5 issues that really should be addressed. First of all, the scope of IAS 38. So consider and clarify the scope, including what types of intangibles should be included, when something is an intangible asset, and how to distinguish between assets covered by IAS 38 and other IFRS standards. Second issue, approaches for different types of intangibles. Consider a combination of all 3 different approaches described in the discussion paper to obtain better information on intangibles. Intangibles differ, of course. The most suitable approach to obtaining better information on one type of intangibles could therefore be very different from the best approach to obtaining better information on another. Third, application guidance. Consider providing application guidance on, for example, recognition requirements and when capitalization of costs should end for intangible assets that are being continuously developed. Fourth, interconnection with sustainability reporting, which is very important for us. Take into account the developments in sustainability reporting, for example, the CSRD, including taking into account the borders between financial reporting and sustainability reporting and the interconnection between the 2 dimensions. And last one, a phased approach. Apply a phased approach so that some improvements can be introduced also in the short term, because we know we have a tendency to take a long time for these kinds of things. So we think that as the European Commission, we think that EFRAG's work so far has prepared the European stakeholders well for the discussion with the IASB, and I know that Andreas Barko will speak here later today, and that they will contribute constructively. Therefore, we're very much looking forward to the coming discussions in 2025. So to conclude, a few words on the the way intangibles have been dealt with in the CSRD, so the requirement on key intangible resources, not assets. Hans has explained some of this already. So certain information on intangible resources is intrinsic to sustainability matters and should therefore be part of sustainability reporting. So for example, information about employee skills, competencies, experience, loyalty to the undertaking, and motivation for improving processes, goods, and services. This is all sustainability information regarding social matters that could be considered as information on intangible resources. Likewise, information about the quality of the relationships between the undertaking and its stakeholders, including customers, suppliers, communities affected by the activity of the undertaking, is sustainability information relevant to social or governance matters that could also be considered as information on intangible resources. Such examples illustrate how in some cases it is not possible to distinguish information on intangible resources from information on sustainability matters, and that's why it needs to be included. So, as we said, in the CSRD, there is an article that now deals with this and provides a requirement to do reporting on these issues. We are currently in the phase where we're still discussing with member states the transposition of the CSRD. We actually had a fourth transposition workshop yesterday with member states. We've received a lot of questions also around the issue of intangibles, and the plan of the Commission is that we will publish Q&A in the first quarter of 2024 to shed additional light on this. I don't think that will be the last step, given that this process will take us, I think, quite some time to go forward. We're very happy that we've been able now to put in place the CSRD itself, but also the ESRS. And I think the next few years will really be, from our side, the focus will be on making all of this work, providing the support to stakeholders to get this off the ground, to provide all the input, to provide all the guidance in order to make this work on intangibles, but I think also in a broader sense, and we're working very closely with our colleagues from AFRAC to create this ecosystem to make this whole reporting effort a success. I thank you very much and wish you a nice conference to continue.
Thank you, Sven, because of course you revealed to us an important step forward about also the topic of this conference about intangibles. So the fact that member states are asking about how to transpose the directive, and also, of course, the bit on intangibles into the national legislation is, of course, an important push forward in this area. And the fact that you're going to include in the first quarter of 2024 some responses in the FAQ side of the website will be an important element to develop the debate. So thank you very much for this development. We comforted by your words, Sven. Of course, as WICI, if also the EFRAG colleagues think that we can provide some input, we're always available, of course, to give some contribution if needed. Of course, now let's move on. I can see Mr. Nasuno already in our big screens. So thank you very much, Nasuno-san, for being with us. It's a great honor, and I hope you can hear us very well. From your expression, it seems that you can hear us, right? It's okay. Okay. Meanwhile, I just wanted to remind why Nasuno-san is with us. That is, of course, a great honor while we solve the technical aspects. As we just heard from Sumita-san, that is the chair of WICI Japan, WICI is also giving a contribution to an important legislative development in Japan. From this year, more than 4,000 companies, listed companies, have to report. They are being mandated to report on human capital. So human capital is going to be, from this year, you know, in Japan, financial year generally terminates on March. So from this year, for more than 4,000, just repeat myself, more than 4,000 Japanese companies have to report on human capital, which is, of course, big wow, because, of course, makes, you know, can be a game changer for sure in Japan. And we think that this is an important element. And one of the key bodies in this important change has been, and is still, the Japanese Cabinet Office. That Nasuno-san is the General Secretary General of the Japanese Cabinet Office. That is, of course, very close, is part of the Japanese government. And that's why we asked Nasuno-san to be with us. And so now let's try. Nasuno-san, can you please say something so we can hear you?
Hi, good morning.
Perfect.
Can you?
Great.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay.
And now we already sent presentation material for you. And could you
show up our slide?
Or if not, we can prepare, which is
just
okay
one second.
for you.
Just 1 second. I think they're putting up the slides.
Okay.
I'm sorry that this is a double complication because we have, of course, a connection from Japan and also the slides. So this is a really, you know, a test for us. So I know I can see they're working on this. Okay, slides are on, Nasuno-san. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Futoshi Nasuno. I am Secretary General of the Intellectual Property Strategy Headquarters. This secretariat oversees Japan's intellectual property policy. Today, I'd like to talk about two specific examples of the Japanese government's effort to promote and materialize integrated thinking. One is about the development of the IP and intangibles governance guidelines. We established these guidelines last year, and they were revised this year. I would like to explain the contents of these guidelines in this presentation. Another one is about our submission to the ISSB on agenda priorities. Responding to the request made by ISSB, we submitted our position last September. Our position is based on the aforementioned guidelines. In the latter part of my presentation, I will explain on this. Page 2, please. Next page. Thank you. I'd like to start with the IP intangibles governance guidelines. Before going to detail, I'd like to provide the background information on the development of the IP intangibles governance guidelines. Please see two graphs below. These graphs show the ratio of the value of the intangibles to the one of whole corporate. The left graph shows the average of the SP 500 major US companies. And the right shows the average of the Nikkei 225 major Japanese companies. As you can see, compared to the US companies, the Japanese companies have a lower ratio of the intangible assets to the whole corporate value. From these facts, we think two things can be said. One is that there needs to be mechanism to enable companies to increase investment in IP intangibles. The other is the obvious fact that investment and application of IP intangibles are essential for companies in providing innovative products and services. Next slide, please. In this slide, I'd like to present the mechanism we intended to realize through application of these guidelines. As you may know, corporate governance in Japan has been strengthened through the revision of the Corporate Governance Code. In 2021, IP-related parts were revised, adding 2 new points. One is that companies are now required to disclose their investment in human capital and in intellectual property. The second is that the board of directors are obliged to supervise these investments. The IP intangible governance guidelines were developed based on this revision. The aim is to promote more effective and enhanced communication between companies and investors. We believe that the strengthened engagement between the companies and the investors will promote investment in IP intangibles, and this will ultimately lead to an increase in corporate value. Next, please. The following is a definition of intellectual property and intangibles in the guidelines. We define IP intangibles broadly. As shown here, they include Press the button. Press the button? Yes, okay. As shown here, they include, for instance, company brands, data held by company, and trust and reputation. They are not limited to intellectual property rights. According to that definition, not only the manufacturing industry, which are often thought to be the main IP and intangible holder, but every industry should have intangible assets that creates unique value. Therefore, we believe that companies in all industries need to develop their own strategies of investment and application of their IP intangibles. Next, please. This is the overall picture of the IP intangibles guidelines. The guidelines consist of 3 elements: the 5 principles, the 7 actions, and the communication framework. The details are explained in the next slides. Next slide, please. The first is the 5 principles. It consists of 4 principles for companies and 1 for investors. For example, the guidelines emphasize the importance for companies to strategically link their IP intangibles to their pricing power or to their ability to change their competitive environment. We also indicated the necessity for investors to deepen understandings on the company's investments, which are made with a medium to long-term perspective to support companies' efforts to invest in the IP intangible assets. Next, please. The second part of the guidelines is 7 actions. Companies are required to take a backcasting approach to develop the investment and application strategies of their IP intangibles so that the strategy could fill the gap between the future goal and the current status. For that to be achieved, companies are expected to take these 7 actions indicated here. The strategy could then be further refined through the communication between companies and investors. Next, please. Before going to the third part of the guidelines, I'd like to mention the gaps that occur when companies communicate with the investors. For example, companies often tend to say, "Our IP is this good." Investors, on the other hand, want to hear, "How and when will you make money with it?" In addition, companies tend to explain a lot about their IP that supports their current business portfolio. Investors, on the other hand, are interested in the IP that leads to medium to long-term corporate value. Next, please. To bridge these gaps, we have proposed a communication framework. This is the third part of the guidelines. We encourage companies and investors to interact with this framework in mind. This framework consists of 3 elements. The first is a story that describes a scenario that the company will take from its current business portfolio to its desired future state. The second is the intended causal path, which shows how the company's IP intangibles are linked to the strengths of the business model in order to realize the story. Third, it is required to explain the investment and application of IP intangibles by linking them to business results and management indicators such as the ROIC reverse tree. These are the guidelines explained above. Next. I'd like to shift to talk about our response to the ISSB's consultation agenda priorities. Next slide, please. As you probably know, the ISSB issued a consultation on agenda priorities in May of this year. In it, the ISSB requested stakeholders to prioritize agenda items for discussion over the next 2 years. The proposed examples of priorities were biodiversity, human capital, human rights, and integration in reporting. Reporting to the core, the Cabinet Office submitted a written opinion in August. More precisely, it was submitted under the name of a study group established at the request of the Cabinet Office. The motive of this submission is as follows. The bottom line is that we believe any disclosing obligation which entails risks for companies to disperse corporate activities beyond the creation of corporate value should be refrained. Japanese industry has concerns in this regard. Therefore, we felt it necessary to emphasize the importance of integrated thinking, which states that disclosure related to medium to long-term corporate value creation should be promoted. Next, please. Next, please. Okay. Key of our submission is threefold. The first is whether reconfirmation of a common understanding among all those involved in IP intangibles that the investment in and application of IP intangibles is essential for companies to provide innovative products and services. The second is that, basing on our aforementioned bottom lines, the integration in reporting should be prioritized in the agenda of ISSB. Advancing the discussion of integration in reporting is essential to enable companies to relate their disclosure to creation of corporate value. Third, the concept of communication framework, which is the third element of the aforementioned guidelines, should be introduced in the development of the criteria of integrated in reporting. We strongly believe that this framework of concept can contribute to the ISSB's objective of strengthening the global baseline for disclosure. Next, please. Finally, here is today's summary. The Japanese government has been working for the past decade to strengthen corporate governance and enhance corporate value. In the guidelines we have developed, it has encouraged that companies should invest in and apply their intellectual property and intangible assets. We believe that any disclosing obligation which entails risks for companies to disperse corporate activities beyond the creation of corporate value should be refrained. We believe in the importance of integrated thinking, which emphasizes the importance of disclosure of information on the relevant medium and long-term corporate value. Last slide, please. In Europe and in Japan, we have a common old saying, if you run after 2 hares, you will catch neither. This concludes my presentation. Thank you for your kind attention. ありがとうございます。
Thank you so much, Nasuno-san. Very wise last sentence.
Thank you.
The audience really appreciated the whole speech, of course, but the last sentence, it was really top. Thank you very much. Maybe you can stay online. Maybe we will have some time for some questions. Okay, and so now we have the third speaker that is, of course, a securities regulator in Europe. We're talking about ESMA. And because I think we will have probably 5-10 minutes for some questions also from the audience, because we're running incredibly early. So, which for being said from an Italian is, you know, remarkable. I think, Alessandro, we can move on to Dr. Alessandro D'Eri from, of course, ESMA. Alessandro. Good morning, Alessandro. Ciao.
Morning.
We can hear you perfectly. And thank you for being here. Thank you to ESMA for, you know, agreeing to be to this forum. And, of course, we would like also to hear your opinions about this topic from a securities regulator perspective. So thank you very much, and the floor is yours, Alessandro.
Thank you, Stefano, and good morning, everyone. I'm sorry I cannot be there in person, but I'll try to do my best to go through a few slides I've prepared and be as clear as possible. It's also a very good opportunity for us to talk about intangibles because this is an area where I believe we need to do more and we need to invest more now that we have set up the sustainability reporting framework and the standards that we are perhaps ready to focus a bit more on intangibles per se, as also I understood discussions were ongoing in terms of the national transposition of the CSRD based on what I heard from Sven. I would like to give just a brief, couple brief words on the stock take on intangibles and why it's so important that we discuss this today. If we move to the second slide, I have a bit of a patchwork there of different initiatives, different things that talk about how important intangibles are. I don't need to explain it to you, obviously. But it's surprising that this comes from different areas. It's not only a matter of reporting, as we know, it's first and foremost a matter of GDP assessment, the gap when we look at capital formation between, for example, EU and US. It's even wider if we look at or account for intangibles. And this, again, it's also why it's important to have a picture that is as transparent as possible on the stock of capital that is intangibles related. But also when you look about the performance of companies, I think a recent report from McKinsey has highlighted that high growth companies in Europe, it's a small scale study, so it doesn't look at all 27 member states, but it still gives a good picture of the fact that high growth companies in Europe are investing almost 2.5 times, more than 2.5 times on intangibles more than the small growing companies, which is not indicating necessarily a causation, but it's an interesting coincidence that we should reflect on. And again, if we want our markets and our companies to thrive, we may need to, and also want them to thrive at a high pace, then we need to look into intangibles more closely. Then the more obvious, I shall say, projects on reporting. There is the work of the IFRS Foundation, the very good proactive work of EFRAG in this area that also Sven already hinted at. In particular, when the IFRS Foundation launched its third agenda consultation for the financial reporting side, also ESMA, that was back in 2021, supported the work on intangibles, the review of ICE 38, acknowledging that this might be a very wide project, but that is also a priority one. Also, when we think about pollutant mechanisms, for example, and how to account for those and whether this constitute intangible resources, I think there is a lot of room for reflection. And the last, perhaps, two pieces I wanted to highlight of this patchwork is one, obviously, ongoing discussions in Europe about the tax base and whether the tax base for having a common approach to tax base for companies in Europe should include or should not include intangibles. That's a key question, and that's something that is being, I think, proposed also by the Commission as one of the possible alternatives. And the last point, it's the interest of academics. I don't need to explain it to you again, because I know you're obviously very much on top of all this, but the intersection between ESG and intangibles has given rise to quite some debates and also interesting papers. I pulled out this paper from Alex Edmonds from the London Business School. He's financial markets specialist and finance expert and professor of finance as well. And his sort of strongest remark is that ESG should not be looked at differently than other intangibles. And again, this highlights the importance of intangibles in the bigger picture and not to focus only on ESG, which nevertheless is very important, of course. So if we look at the next slide, we have highlighted here a few challenges and opportunities. If we zoom into the intangibles reporting area, obviously on the challenging side, I see very much a bit the tension or the lack of clarity between what is value creation on the one hand and what is the interaction with the notions of double materiality or financial or impact materiality. I think these are concepts that will need to be digested in a way that one concept, value creation, speaks to the other, i.e. to double materiality. And this is also one challenge in making the reporting of ESG together with the reporting on intangibles more understandable by investors. Am I looking at the sustainability of a company, or am I looking at the value creation, or how the two things speak to each other? And obviously they are connected and they should not be conflicting to each other, but this needs to be explained. Then the second element is that there is a lot of perhaps marketing still around intangibles, and when people then want to for example, highlight the importance of diversity, which is obviously important per se, without the implications for financial markets, but it's an important diversity per se is an important value. Then people tend to jump to conclusions that diversity is also important for performance without necessarily looking at causation, and so this sometimes detracts from the value of intangibles or the value of intangibles reporting, because then the detractors of this type of reporting will say, oh, there is no proof. And so we need to, my message is that we need to be disciplined, I believe, when we link intangibles and performance and riskiness of companies. Similar things happen with the so-called halo effect. So you see something that is looks very nice, and so information about how satisfied your employees are, and this immediately jumps to a conclusion that there is less riskiness of a company, for example, which may well be the case. But again, this needs to be explained. This needs to be substantiated with research that obviously in past years has happened, of course. The last point is that intangibles reporting is more effective if there is a conduct obligation about reporting on intangibles, about fostering intangibles, investing on intangibles. And here I think all the discussions that are happening in Europe about the CSDDD the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, that is very much linked to how much we want conduct obligations to support reporting rather than letting reporting requirements do everything on themselves. The opportunity side is a bit more obvious, I might say, not less important, though. It was mentioned already this morning that there is a wide gap still between market values and book values. Largely explained research, academic research told us already in past years by the limited transparency on intangibles. One topic of which we don't talk anymore as much as we did in the past is long-termism. Our markets are still too much short-term oriented. And again, intangibles help, and intangibles reporting help fostering long-termism. We shouldn't forget about this, and this is also important from the perspective of securities regulators. The other perspective I hinted at is that financial performance is important, but it's not everything. And so we need to focus and shift from financial performance to value creation. And again, intangibles reporting help and have a great opportunity to do that. And lastly, I think it was hinted at also in the presentation of Mr. Nasuno, when companies make claims about their intangibles or about their sustainability, if there is not a strong intangibles reporting regime underneath, it's easy to have some intangibles washing, if you wish, or not to provide sufficient information that the markets want. So moving to the next slide, what we see today is that in Europe the legislative requirements are going to the direction of providing more transparency on some intangibles. It was mentioned already, the CSRD requires both these intangibles disclosed through the ESG dimension, as well as key intangibles, key intangible resources that create value for the undertaking. I think this is an important addition to the existing requirements, to the accounting directive, the reference not only to key intangibles, but also to value creation, which did not exist before. And again, I hope here, and I trust that all the players that have invested so much in the past years on integrated reporting, intangibles, will now help Europe giving a bit more discipline to what is to be understood as value creation. At the moment, the directive doesn't define value creation. And so that I see, there I see some room for quite substantive work. One area, though, that we may need to look at is that the presentation formats of all this information is not fixed. There is no mandatory presentation in the ESRS. When you look at the sustainability reporting, there are some examples, not mandatory examples of presentation. And this raises the question, can I still use integrated reporting together with sustainability reporting? Obviously, everyone would like to say the answer is yes, should be yes. Just we need to figure out how to do that. And so again, presentation and how to combine the sustainability statement, the management, the rest of the management report together to tell a consistent story. That's something that is to be investigated. On the other hand, the sustainability statement was conceived to be a document that needs to be self-standing. So it cannot be a document that is an empty box, plenty of cross-references to other documents in the management report. So there is a tension between the notion of the sustainability statement as a standalone document, like the financial statement, and how to integrate it with the rest of the management report. And this is what I meant with the measured use of cross-referencing. So if we look at the next slide, I've highlighted here a few activities that ESMA does in the area of corporate reporting that may have links to the work on intangibles. This is not only work related to intangibles, but obviously it helps also on the intangibles reporting. ESMA gives opinions on the ESRS. This is a mandatory task. And as part of our opinion, obviously, we look at the relevance of the reporting. So in the future, we may also think about the intangibles dimension that we haven't so far necessarily investigated when assessing the ESRS. We also develop guidelines on enforcement of sustainability reporting. This will be hopefully a consultation soon on those draft guidelines. And again, here the question will be when supervisors look at the ESRS reporting, if there's something specifically they have to look at in terms of intangibles or value creation, for example. This is not necessarily crystal clear today, and I trust that also through the third point, the supervisory case discussions, we might have questions from NCAs, from the national competent authorities asking, okay, we have encountered this case of presentation of intangibles and interaction with ESRS reporting. Is this acceptable? Is this a good practice or not? So this is something we regularly do, having those discussions. And then I mentioned here the greenwashing project. This is to me linked a bit. The principles behind fighting greenwashing are similar to what we should do to fight any type of window dressing, if you wish. So even related to intangibles washing, if there are overstatements about how great your company is in retaining employees or customers, that should be assessed under the lens of whether that claim is faithful or not. So the greenwashing project, I encourage you to have a look at. We issued last May a report on greenwashing. The principles underlying the way we look at greenwashing will be very similar when we look at other misleading claims. And last 2 points, we obviously engage with standard setters internationally, with auditors, but also with EFRAG, and we work very much, and we support very much the work of EFRAG, especially on the implementation of ESRS. And again, there may be questions about the intangibles dimension as well. So moving to the next slide, just a few 3 words, because I think have a minute on the outlook. What I think it will be important for the next years, or very much for the next year, is to have a discussion about the presentation formats. We'll need to have a consistent story, a management report that makes sense, and companies that want to do integrated reporting should be able to do it following, also being in line with CSRD requirements. So we need to have a discussion about how this can take place. Digitization is the next topic on the agenda, I believe, to give transparency to intangibles, to earmark disclosures that have to do with intangibles, so that immediately investors can see what are the data points related to intangibles. That's very important. And the third point and last point, and then I'll close, is we need to combine the ESG dimension with the intangibles dimension. So we may need to have what I called here intangibles maps throughout the management report. We may need to guide the reader to say, okay, we have presented to you the ESG dimension on employees, on the value chain, etc. But this is how this relates to intangibles. This is how intangibles are addressed across the management report. And this is, I believe, missing today. So thank you very much. And obviously, if there are any questions, I'm happy to take those. Thank you.
Thank you, Alessandro, for such an excellent presentation. I think we have 1 minute for questions. So you already said something, Alessandro, about the future, which is the roadmap for the future. In a sense, I would like to launch to you as ESMA and maybe to some of the present people here, the idea of ESGI, with I stands for intangibles, because if we talk about value creation, and we all agree on value creation, I suspect, and I like the last point you raised about we need to combine, I think I'm quoting literally, ESG with intangibles. So ESGI, that's the future perhaps. We need also slogans, you know, so that might be a slogan. So thank you for your presentation. Nasuno-san, you're still there. I would like to raise, and Eric, you're ready for a question as well. Because the European Commission has been is modular, so Sven, unfortunately, Sven Gentner had to go, but we have a very good substitute for Sven. Nasuno-san, you know, what is the future? How you see the developments in short, medium, and long term about intangibles? You already said that in Japan you took a very important step forward about the new guidelines, the second version, and human capital in particular. How do you see the future in Japan and internationally? Thank you.
Future.
The future of intangibles, of course, about in this area.
Yeah, evaluating it's a personal opinion, but I think evaluation of intangible is very, very difficult. So integrated thinking is one way. So we want to promote such a way, and in the long term, we don't know. That's our expression.
Thank you. Yeah, just because, how do you see in Japan the evolution of your guidelines?
Yeah, now we are promoting our guidelines in Japan, and some companies are promoting their disclosure, but others not. So,
but gradually promoting, yeah.
So now promoting, and next stage we don't know.
Well, let's see. Let's hope for the best for the future. Thank you, yes. Thank you again, Nasuno-san and Japanese Cabinet Office. Thank you. And I would like to address the same question to the European Commission. Eric, do you have what is your view on this area from your perspective?
Well,
yeah, sure, it works. Perfect.
It works? Okay, great. Well, thank you. I'm a bit taken by surprise to replace Sven, but it doesn't matter, you know. Well, I think the future is we have laid a foundation, I think, in the CSRD, which is amending the accounting directive, which will require companies in scope of the CSRD, which are large companies and listed SMEs, to report, I think, for the first time on the key intangible resources, which is a broad definition. It entails also the intangible assets. And companies have to report on how their business model fundamentally depends on those key intangible resources, as well as how those intangible resources create value and what the relationship is there. So what I think for the future, we, as Sven told, are working together with member states to see how they can implement the requirements of the CSRD into the national legislation, and then we expect management reports that will come depending on whenever the CSRD has to be applied by companies from 2024 onwards. Then we see what the developments will be, what companies will actually disclose. And I think the CSRD will give a fundament to see how things evolve, and also a hook to do further work if needed. So that's how I would see the future on this. The future is bright.
The future is bright. That's a great close. Thank you very much to your interventions and speeches. We need to move to investors, because we want to hear from investors what they would like from us. And please join me in applauding and giving a round of applause to our speakers. Thank you very much, Alessandro. Thank you very much, Nasuno-san. Our WICI Europe president.
Thank you, Stefano. We are on time. Stefano is a little bit surprised, but I'm not, because the headquarters of my bank I'm working for is in Switzerland. So I'm fine with that timing, that we keep the tempo, if I may say.